The winter wind cut through Vincent Morgan's coat like 1,000 frozen knives as he guided his wagon through the desolate prairie landscape outside Winnetka, Illinois, where the town met endless stretches of wilderness in the bitter January of 1878. He had been traveling for 3 days straight, delivering supplies to distant homesteads scattered across the frozen countryside, and his bones ached from the cold that seemed to seep into his very marrow. The snow had started falling heavily an hour ago, turning the world into a swirling white void that made it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. His horses snorted and stamped their hooves nervously as he finally decided to make camp for the night, knowing that pushing forward in these conditions would be suicide for both man and beast. Vincent climbed down from the driver's seat, his boots crunching in the fresh snow that already reached his ankles. At 26 years old, he had spent the better part of his adult life working as a cowboy and freight hauler, moving between ranches and towns across the Midwest. His tall frame was built for hard labor, with broad shoulders and strong hands that had roped cattle, broken horses, and driven wagons through every kind of weather imaginable. His dark brown hair hung down to his collar, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face, providing some protection against the biting wind. His blue eyes, usually bright and observant, were now squinted against the driving snow as he began unhitching his horses and setting up a basic camp. He worked quickly and efficiently, years of experience guiding his movements even as his fingers grew numb from the cold. He tied the horses to a sturdy tree where they would have some shelter from the worst of the wind, then gathered what little dry wood he could find to start a fire. The flames were small and pitiful at first, but he coaxed them into something more substantial, enough to at least warm his hands and heat some coffee. He pulled his bedroll from the wagon and laid it near the fire, then checked his supplies to see what he could eat for dinner. Salted pork, hardtack, and some beans would have to do. It was not much, but it was better than nothing. As he settled down to eat his meager meal, Vincent heard a sound that made him freeze. It was faint, almost lost in the howling wind, but unmistakable. A cough. A human cough. He set down his tin cup and listened intently, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip. Out here in the wilderness, you never knew what kind of trouble might find you. Bandits, desperate men fleeing the law, or even hostile groups could be lurking anywhere. But that cough had sounded weak, almost pitiful. Vincent grabbed a burning branch from the fire and held it up like a torch, walking slowly around the perimeter of his camp. The snow was falling so thick now that visibility was nearly zero, but he kept searching, following his instincts. When he reached the back of his wagon, he crouched down and held the torch lower, peering into the darkness beneath the wooden frame. What he saw made his heart stop. Huddled beneath his wagon, pressed against one of the wheels for shelter, was a woman. She was curled into a tight ball, her arms wrapped around her knees, her entire body shaking violently from the cold. Her clothes were soaked through, offering no protection whatsoever against the freezing temperatures. Her lips were blue, her face pale as death, and her dark hair was matted with snow and ice. She looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes, like a trapped animal expecting a killing blow. "Jesus Christ," Vincent breathed, immediately dropping the torch and reaching for her. "How long have you been under there?" The woman tried to speak, but her teeth were chattering so hard that she could barely form words. "PP, please," she managed to gasp out. "D, don't hurt me." "I am not going to hurt you," Vincent said firmly, his mind racing as he assessed the situation. She was in bad shape, worse than bad. Hypothermia had clearly set in, and if he did not get her warm immediately, she would die. He reached under the wagon and gently but firmly pulled her out, ignoring her weak protests. She weighed almost nothing, and he could feel her bones through the wet fabric of her dress. How long had she been out here? How had she survived this long? He carried her to the fire, setting her down as close to the flames as he dared without risking burns. She continued to shake uncontrollably, her eyes unfocused and glassy. Vincent knew he had to act fast. He quickly retrieved blankets from his wagon, wrapping them around her soaked form, but he knew that would not be enough. Wet clothes would kill her just as surely as no clothes at all. "Listen to me," he said, kneeling in front of her and forcing her to look at him. "You need to get out of those wet clothes. You are going to die if you do not." She stared at him with those terrified eyes, clearly not comprehending his words. Her whole body was shutting down from the cold. Vincent cursed under his breath and made a decision. Modesty would have to take a backseat to survival. He worked quickly, removing her soaked dress and undergarments with as much clinical detachment as he could manage, though his face burned with the awkwardness of the situation. She was too far gone to even protest, her movements sluggish and uncoordinated. Once he had her stripped down, he wrapped her in every dry blanket he had, then added his own coat for extra warmth. He built up the fire until it was roaring, the flames leaping high into the night sky. Then he did the only thing he could think of that might save her life. He climbed into the cocoon of blankets with her, pressing his own body heat against hers, trying to share his warmth. At first, she felt like a block of ice against him. Her skin was so cold it almost hurt to touch. But slowly, agonizingly slowly, he felt her body begin to warm. The violent shaking began to subside somewhat, though she still trembled. He held her close, rubbing her arms and back to stimulate circulation, all the while talking to her in a low, soothing voice. "You are going to be all right," he murmured. "Just hold on. You are safe now. I have got you." He had no idea if she could even hear him, but he kept talking anyway, hoping the sound of his voice might provide some comfort. Hours passed like this, with Vincent holding this strange woman close to the fire, willing her to survive. He fed more wood to the flames whenever they began to die down, never letting the heat fade. Gradually, color began to return to her face. Her lips were no longer blue, and her skin felt warmer to the touch. Her breathing became more regular, less labored. Finally, just before dawn, her eyes fluttered open. They were brown, he noticed for the first time, a deep chocolate brown that reminded him of rich soil after a rain. She looked up at him with confusion and lingering fear, but also something else. Gratitude, perhaps, or maybe just relief at being alive. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice hoarse and scratchy. "You are safe," Vincent replied. "You are at my camp. I found you under my wagon last night, half frozen to death. What is your name?" She was quiet for a long moment, as if considering whether to answer. Finally, she spoke. "Rebecca. Rebecca Cooper. Vincent Morgan," he said. "Can you tell me what happened? How did you end up out here in the middle of a snowstorm?" Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away from him. "I was running," she said softly. "I had to get away." "From what?" She was silent again, and Vincent did not push. Whatever had driven her out into the deadly cold must have been terrible indeed. He could wait for answers. Right now, what mattered was keeping her alive and getting her strength back. "Are you hungry?" he asked gently. She nodded weakly. Vincent carefully extricated himself from the blankets and set about preparing some food. He heated water for coffee and cooked up some beans and salt pork, making sure to give her the larger portion. She ate slowly at first, as if her body had forgotten how, but then with increasing hunger. He watched her eat, noting the bruises on her wrists that he had seen when removing her wet clothes. Old bruises, mostly faded, but telling nonetheless. As the morning light grew stronger and the snow finally stopped falling, Vincent began to get a better look at Rebecca. She was young, probably around 21 or 22, with delicate features and dark brown hair that fell in waves past her shoulders once it dried. Even half-starved and exhausted as she was, there was a quiet beauty about her, but it was her eyes that caught his attention most. They held a depth of sadness and fear that no one so young should have to carry. After she had eaten and drunk some hot coffee, some of the strength seemed to return to her. She sat up straighter, pulling the blankets more tightly around herself, suddenly seeming to remember her state of undress. Her face flushed red with embarrassment. "My clothes," she said quietly. "I hung them by the fire to dry," Vincent said, gesturing to where her dress and undergarments were draped over makeshift lines near the flames. "They were soaked through. I had no choice but to remove them. I apologize for any impropriety, but you would have died otherwise." "You saved my life," Rebecca said, her voice thick with emotion. "I should be thanking you, not worrying about modesty. I thought I was going to die out there. I had given up." "What were you running from, Rebecca?" She looked down at her hands, which were wrapped around the warm tin cup of coffee. Her fingers were still slightly red from frostbite, but Vincent thought she would recover without losing any digits, thank God. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My husband." Vincent felt his jaw tighten. He had suspected as much from the bruises, but hearing it confirmed made his blood boil. "He hurt you." It was not a question. Rebecca nodded, tears streaming down her face now. "He hurt me all the time, for 3 years, ever since we were married. At first it was just words. He would tell me I was stupid, worthless, that no one else would ever want me. Then it became pushing, shoving, then hitting, then worse." Her voice broke on the last word, and Vincent felt a surge of protective anger unlike anything he had ever experienced. He wanted to find this man and make him pay for what he had done to her. But more than that, he wanted to make sure Rebecca felt safe, that she knew she would never have to go back to that life. "Where is he now?" Vincent asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "In Winnetka, I hope. Or maybe he is out looking for me. I do not know. I waited until he passed out drunk 3 nights ago, then I took what I could carry and ran. I have been walking ever since, trying to get as far away as possible. I thought if I could make it to the next town, I could disappear, start over. But the snow came and I got lost, and I was so cold I could not feel my feet anymore. When I saw your wagon, I thought maybe I could shelter under it for just a little while, just long enough to rest. I did not mean to intrude on your camp." "You are not intruding," Vincent said firmly. "And you are not going back to him. I will make sure of that." Rebecca looked at him with such hope and vulnerability that it nearly broke his heart. "You would help me. You do not even know me." "I know enough," Vincent said. "No woman deserves to be treated the way you have been. And no man worth his salt would send you back to someone who hurts you." Fresh tears spilled down Rebecca's cheeks, but these seemed different from the earlier ones. These were tears of relief, of gratitude, maybe even of hope. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." They sat in silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts as the fire crackled between them. Vincent found himself studying Rebecca when she was not looking, taking in the details of her face, the way she held herself with a mixture of fear and determination. Despite everything she had been through, there was a strength to her that he admired. It took courage to run, to choose the unknown dangers of the wilderness over the known dangers of an abusive husband. As the day wore on and Rebecca's clothes finally dried, Vincent turned away to give her privacy while she dressed. He busied himself with checking on the horses and reorganizing his wagon, though his thoughts kept returning to the woman he had found. What was he going to do with her? He could not just leave her out here, but he also had obligations. He still had deliveries to make, places to be. And yet, the thought of abandoning her was unthinkable. When Rebecca emerged, fully dressed, she looked more like herself, though still pale and drawn from her ordeal. She approached him hesitantly, as if unsure of her welcome now that the immediate crisis had passed. "What will you do now?" she asked. Vincent considered the question carefully. "I was heading back to Winnetka after making my last delivery. But under the circumstances, I think it would be better to take you somewhere else. Somewhere your husband will not find you. Do you have family anywhere? Friends who could take you in?" Rebecca shook her head sadly. "My family disowned me when I married Jacob. They said he was no good, but I did not listen. I thought I knew better. As for friends, Jacob made sure I did not keep any. He said they were a bad influence, that they were trying to turn me against him. I have no one." The loneliness in her voice cut Vincent to the core. To be so completely alone in the world, with nowhere to turn, no one to rely on. It was a fate worse than death for some people. But Vincent had a solution, though it was unconventional and would require some rearranging of his plans. "Then you will come with me," he said decisively. "I have a small piece of land about 2 days' ride from here, near a town called Galena. It is not much, just a cabin and a few acres, but it is mine. You can stay there while you figure out what you want to do next. No strings attached, no expectations. Just a safe place to recover and plan your future." Rebecca stared at him in disbelief. "You would do that for me, a complete stranger?" "Yes," Vincent said simply, "I would." She was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with whether to trust this offer. Vincent could understand her hesitation. After years of abuse, trusting any man would be difficult, but finally she nodded. "All right," she said softly. "Thank you. I do not know how I will ever repay you for your kindness." "You do not need to repay me," Vincent said. "Just focus on healing and getting stronger. That is all I ask." They broke camp shortly after, with Vincent helping Rebecca into the wagon where she could ride more comfortably than on the driver's bench. He had made her a nest of blankets to keep her warm, and she settled in gratefully, exhaustion still evident in every line of her body. As Vincent guided the horses back onto what passed for a road, he found himself hyper-aware of the woman in his wagon. The way her presence seemed to change everything about this familiar journey. The trip to Vincent's cabin took longer than usual because of the snow, and because he took extra care to ensure Rebecca's comfort. They stopped frequently to rest and eat, and Vincent found himself talking more than he usually did. Rebecca seemed curious about his life, asking questions about his work as a freighter, about the places he had been and the things he had seen. In turn, he learned more about her. She had been born in Winnetka, the youngest of 3 daughters in a family that ran a small dry goods store. Her childhood had been happy enough, though her father was strict and her mother distant. She had met Jacob Cooper when she was 17, swept off her feet by his charm and good looks. Against her family's wishes, she had married him just after her 18th birthday. The first few months had been good, or so she thought, but then the mask had slipped and she saw the real man beneath. By then, it was too late. She was trapped. "He made me believe it was my fault," Rebecca said quietly one evening as they camped. "Every time he hit me, he would say I had provoked him, that I had made him angry. I started to believe him. I thought if I could just be better, quieter, more obedient, he would stop. But it never mattered what I did. There was always something wrong, always some reason for him to lash out." Vincent listened with a heavy heart, wishing he could take away her pain. "It was never your fault," he said firmly. "What he did to you was wrong, and nothing you did or did not do could justify it." "I know that now," Rebecca said, "or at least I am starting to know it. But it is hard to undo years of believing something different." "It will take time," Vincent agreed, But you have time now. You are free of him." Rebecca smiled at that, a small but genuine smile that lit up her face. It was the first time Vincent had seen her smile, and he found himself hoping to see it more often. By the time they reached Vincent's property on the third day of travel, a tentative friendship had formed between them. Rebecca seemed more relaxed around him, no longer flinching when he moved suddenly or spoke too loudly. She had started to regain some of her strength, eating better and sleeping more soundly. The bruises on her wrists had faded to a pale yellow, barely visible now. Vincent's cabin was small but well built, a single room with a stone fireplace, a wooden bed frame in one corner, a rough table with 2 chairs, and not much else. It was a bachelor's home, functional rather than comfortable. Rebecca looked around with wide eyes as Vincent carried his supplies inside. "It is not much," he said apologetically, "but it is warm and dry and the roof does not leak." "It is wonderful," Rebecca said sincerely. "It is more than I could have hoped for." Vincent set about building a fire in the hearth while Rebecca explored the small space. There was not much to see, but she seemed fascinated by everything, touching the rough wooden walls, examining the few books on a shelf, looking out the single window at the snow-covered landscape beyond. "There is only one bed," Vincent said, suddenly realizing the awkwardness of the situation. "You should take it. I will sleep on the floor. I have done it plenty of times before." "I cannot take your bed," Rebecca protested. "This is your home. I am the guest." "You are recovering from near death by freezing," Vincent countered. "You need the bed more than I do. I insist." They argued about it for a while, but eventually Rebecca gave in, too tired to fight anymore. That night, as she slept in his bed and Vincent lay on the floor wrapped in blankets near the fire, he found himself staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. He kept thinking about Rebecca, about her story, about the fear in her eyes when she talked about her husband. He thought about the way she smiled when she felt safe, the way she tilted her head when she was curious about something. He was in trouble, he realized. He was starting to care about her, and not just in a protective, pitying way. There was something about Rebecca Cooper that drew him in, made him want to know everything about her, made him want to see her smile every day for the rest of his life. It was a dangerous feeling, especially given her recent trauma. The last thing she needed was another man making demands of her, expecting things from her. So Vincent made a promise to himself that night. He would protect her, help her, be her friend, but he would not push for anything more, no matter how much he might want to. Rebecca deserved time to heal, to find herself again. If she ever wanted more from him than friendship, it would have to be her choice, freely made. The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Vincent continued his work as a freighter, making shorter trips now so he would not be gone for more than a day or two at a time. Rebecca stayed at the cabin, gradually making it feel more like a home. She cleaned and organized, mended his clothes, cooked proper meals instead of the simple fare he usually ate. She seemed to find peace in the domestic tasks, taking pride in caring for the space. But more than that, she began to heal emotionally. Away from Jacob's constant abuse and criticism, Rebecca started to remember who she was, or maybe discover who she could be. She laughed more easily now, her smiles coming more frequently. She talked about her dreams and hopes, things she had not dared to think about for years. She wanted to learn to read better, she said. Jacob had discouraged her education, saying women did not need book learning. She wanted to maybe start a small garden in the spring, grow vegetables and flowers. Simple things, but they meant the world to her. Vincent found himself falling deeper for her with each passing day. He loved the way she hummed while she worked, the way she got a little furrow between her eyebrows when she was concentrating on something, the way she always made sure he had eaten enough when he came home from a trip. but he kept his feelings to himself, careful not to make her uncomfortable or put pressure on her. February gave way to March, and the worst of winter began to release its grip. The snow started to melt, revealing brown grass and mud beneath. Rebecca had been with Vincent for nearly 2 months now, and the change in her was remarkable. She had gained weight, filling out her too thin frame. The haunted look had left her eyes, replaced by a quiet contentment. She smiled readily now, even laughed at Vincent's terrible jokes. One evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Rebecca suddenly spoke up. "Vincent, can I ask you something?" "Of course," he said, setting down the piece of wood he had been carving. "Why have you been so kind to me? You have given up your bed, shared your food, opened your home to me. You have asked for nothing in return. I do not understand why." Vincent considered his answer carefully. "When I was younger, maybe 18 or 19, I worked on a ranch down in Missouri. There was a woman there, the rancher's wife. Her husband was a cruel man, mean-spirited and violent. One day, I saw him hit her in the barn when he thought no one was looking. I was young and stupid, and I confronted him about it. He fired me on the spot, ran me off the property. I have always regretted that I did not do more, that I left her there with him. When I found you under my wagon that night, I saw a chance to do what I should have done years ago, to actually help instead of just walking away." Rebecca's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You are a good man, Vincent Morgan, better than you know." "I am just a man," Vincent said uncomfortably, never good at accepting compliments. "Trying to do the right thing." "No," Rebecca said firmly. "You are more than that. You are kind and patient and decent. In 2 months of living together, you have never once made me feel unsafe or pressured or uncomfortable. You treat me like an equal, like my thoughts and feelings matter. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Vincent felt his face heat with embarrassment, but also with pleasure at her words. "You deserve to be treated with respect. Any woman does." Rebecca moved closer to him, until they were sitting side by side on the bench near the fire. She reached out and took his hand, the first time she had initiated physical contact since that first night. Vincent froze, afraid to move and break the moment. "I need to tell you something," Rebecca said softly. "A confession, I suppose." "You can tell me anything," Vincent replied, his heart pounding. "I am still married," she said, "to Jacob. I have been thinking about it, trying to figure out what to do. I do not want to be married to him anymore. The thought of ever seeing him again makes me feel sick. But I do not know how to end it. Divorce is difficult and expensive, and there is such a stigma attached to it. People would judge me for it. But I cannot stay married to him, even if it is just on paper. I need to be free of him completely." "Then we will figure out how to get you a divorce," Vincent said. "I have some money saved. We can hire a lawyer, do whatever needs to be done." "It is not just about the money," Rebecca said. "Although I appreciate the offer, it is about what comes after. Even if I get a divorce, I will be a divorced woman. I will be damaged goods in the eyes of society. No respectable man would want me." Vincent felt his chest tighten. "That is not true." Rebecca looked up at him with those deep brown eyes. "Is it not? Tell me honestly, Vincent, would you want a woman who was divorced, who had been married to another man?" This was it, Vincent realized. The moment of truth. He could hedge, could try to answer diplomatically. Or he could be honest, even if it meant risking everything. "I would want you," he said quietly. "Divorced, married, whatever. I would want you, Rebecca. I have wanted you since the day I found you under my wagon, maybe even before then, from the first moment I saw you breathing and alive. I know I should not say this. I know you need time and space to heal, and you do not need another man complicating your life. But you asked for honesty, so I am giving it to you. I care about you. More than I should, more than I have any right to." Rebecca was staring at him, her mouth slightly open in shock. For a long moment she said nothing, and Vincent felt his heart sink. He had ruined everything by opening his mouth. She would leave now, feeling uncomfortable and pressured, and he would lose the best thing that had ever happened to him. But then Rebecca smiled, and it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "I care about you too," she whispered. "I have been so afraid to admit it, even to myself. After Jacob, I did not think I could ever feel that way about a man again. I thought that part of me was broken forever. But you have shown me that not all men are like him. You have shown me what it feels like to be treated with kindness and respect. And somewhere along the way I fell in love with you." Vincent felt like he could not breathe. "You love me." "Yes," Rebecca said, tears streaming down her face now. "I love you, Vincent Morgan, and it terrifies me because I do not know if I can trust these feelings. I do not know if I am ready for this, but I also do not want to run from it just because I am scared." Vincent reached up and gently wiped the tears from her face. "We will take it slow," he said. "As slow as you need. There is no rush, no pressure. We have all the time in the world." Rebecca leaned into his touch, and then she was kissing him. It was a soft, tentative kiss, full of hope and fear and love all mixed together. Vincent kissed her back gently, letting her set the pace, letting her be in control. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "That was my first kiss that I actually wanted," Rebecca said wonderingly. "The first one that felt right." "I am honored," Vincent said seriously, and he meant it. They sat together by the fire for hours that night, talking about everything and nothing. Rebecca told him more about her childhood, about the dreams she had once had before Jacob crushed them. Vincent told her about his family, about losing his parents to illness when he was young, about making his way in the world alone. They made plans for the future, tentative and hopeful. Rebecca would pursue a divorce from Jacob. It would take time and money, but they would see it through. And when she was finally free, if she still wanted him, Vincent would marry her properly. The next few months were a time of building and growing for both of them. Rebecca worked with a lawyer in Galena to begin divorce proceedings, which required establishing that she had been abused and abandoned. The lawyer was sympathetic and willing to work with her, especially after seeing the fading bruises and hearing her story. Jacob was served with papers at his home in Winnetka, and according to reports, he flew into a rage. But he did not come looking for Rebecca, perhaps because he knew she would have witnesses now, people who would protect her. During this time, Vincent and Rebecca's relationship deepened. They continued to take things slowly, mindful of Rebecca's need to heal and Vincent's desire not to pressure her. But there were more kisses, more touches, more moments of tenderness. Vincent found excuses to be near her whenever possible, and Rebecca began to seek him out, craving his presence. They worked together on improving the cabin, adding shelves and a proper kitchen area. Rebecca started her garden as soon as the ground thawed, planting seeds with hopeful determination. In May, good news arrived. The divorce had been granted. Rebecca was free. She had expected to feel elation, but instead she felt mostly relief and a strange sense of grief. Not for Jacob or the marriage, but for the years she had lost, the innocence that had been stolen from her. Vincent held her while she cried, understanding that she needed to mourn before she could truly move forward. "I am free," she said through her tears. "I am really free." "You are," Vincent confirmed, "and you get to decide what comes next. What do you want, Rebecca?" She pulled back and looked at him, her eyes red but determined. "I want you," she said. "I want a life with you if you will still have me, still have you," Vincent laughed. "Rebecca, I have been yours since the day I found you. Nothing has changed that." "Then ask me," she said. "Ask me properly." Vincent's heart swelled with love for this brave, resilient woman. He got down on one knee right there in the cabin, taking her hand in his. "Rebecca Cooper, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I promise to love you, respect you, and protect you for all the days of my life. I promise to never raise a hand to you in anger, to never make you feel small or afraid. I promise to be your partner in all things, to listen to your thoughts and value your opinions. Will you marry me?" Rebecca was crying again, but these were happy tears. "Yes," she said, pulling him to his feet and into her arms. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married in June in a small ceremony at the church in Galena. Rebecca wore a simple blue dress that Vincent had bought for her, and she carried wildflowers from her garden. There were few guests, just a handful of friends Vincent had made over the years and the lawyer who had helped with the divorce. But it did not matter. What mattered was the look in Vincent's eyes as Rebecca walked toward him, the way he held her hand during the ceremony as if she were the most precious thing in the world. That night, in the privacy of their cabin, Rebecca and Vincent consummated their marriage. It was tender and sweet, with Vincent being incredibly gentle and patient, constantly checking to make sure Rebecca was comfortable and willing. It was healing for Rebecca, this act of intimacy that was about love and connection rather than power and control. And it was profound for Vincent, who had never felt so complete as he did holding his wife in his arms. Life settled into a new normal after the wedding. Vincent continued his freighting business, though he turned down the longer trips so he could spend more time at home. Rebecca expanded her garden and started selling vegetables at the market in Galena. She also began teaching herself to read better using Vincent's small collection of books, and she started attending a women's group at the church, where she made friends for the first time in years. About 8 months after their wedding, Rebecca began to feel unwell. She was tired all the time, nauseous in the mornings, and her monthly courses had stopped. She and Vincent both knew what that meant, and they were overjoyed. A baby. They were going to have a baby. The pregnancy was not easy. Rebecca struggled with sickness for the first few months, and there were times when old fears resurfaced. What if she was a bad mother? What if her experiences with Jacob had broken something in her that could not be fixed? But Vincent was there every step of the way, reassuring her, supporting her, reminding her that she was strong and capable and would be a wonderful mother. In late autumn of 1879, nearly 2 years after Vincent had found Rebecca freezing under his wagon, their son was born. It was a long, difficult labor, and there were moments when Vincent feared he might lose both Rebecca and the baby. But Rebecca was stronger than anyone gave her credit for, and she fought through the pain with determination. When the baby finally arrived, his cries filling the cabin, Vincent felt tears streaming down his face. "We have a son," the midwife said, placing the squalling infant in Rebecca's arms. "A healthy baby boy." Rebecca looked down at the tiny red face, the flailing fists, and she smiled through her exhaustion. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your mama." They named him William after Vincent's father. He was a demanding baby, crying often and sleeping little, but neither Vincent nor Rebecca minded. They were besotted with him, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes, the way he gripped their fingers with surprising strength, the little sounds he made. As William grew from infant to toddler, the family grew as well. Rebecca became pregnant again when William was 18 months old, and this time she gave birth to twin girls. They named them Sarah and Elizabeth, and suddenly the small cabin felt very full indeed. Vincent added on to the cabin, building another room for the children and expanding the kitchen area. Life was busy and chaotic with 3 young children, but it was also joyful in a way Vincent had never imagined possible. He loved coming home after a day of work to find Rebecca in the garden with the children playing nearby, William chasing butterflies while the twins babbled to each other in their own language. He loved the family dinners where William would chatter excitedly about his day, and the twins would smear food all over their faces. He loved the evenings when the children were finally asleep, and he could hold Rebecca close, both of them exhausted but content. Rebecca bloomed in motherhood. She was patient and loving with the children, but also firm when she needed to be. She taught William his letters and numbers, read stories to all three children every night, and filled their home with laughter and warmth. The frightened, broken woman Vincent had found under his wagon was gone, replaced by someone confident and strong. She still had moments of fear, times when old memories resurfaced, but they were fewer and further between now. One evening, when William was 4 and the twins were 2, Vincent and Rebecca sat on the porch of their expanded cabin, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The children were asleep inside, finally worn out after a day of play. "You ever think about that night?" Rebecca asked quietly. "The night you found me, sometimes," Vincent admitted. "I think about how close you came to dying, how easily I could have just made camp and never checked under the wagon. We would have ridden away the next morning and you would have frozen to death, and I never would have known." "God brought us together," Rebecca said. "I truly believe that. I had given up that night. I thought I was going to die, and part of me almost welcomed it. I was so tired of hurting, so tired of being afraid. But then you found me, and you saved me in more ways than one." Vincent reached over and took her hand. "You saved me too. I did not even realize how lonely I was until you came into my life. You and the children, you are everything to me." "We love you too," Rebecca said, squeezing his hand. "More than words can say." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the crickets chirp and the distant sound of a dog barking. It was a peaceful moment, made all the more precious by how hard one it had been. "I have been thinking," Rebecca said eventually, "about Jacob. I heard through the grapevine that he died last year, drank himself to death, apparently." Vincent felt a complex mix of emotions at this news. He could not say he was sorry, not after what Jacob had done to Rebecca. But he also felt a certain sadness for a life so wasted, so consumed by anger and violence. "How do you feel about that?" he asked carefully. Rebecca was quiet for a moment, considering. "Relieved, mostly. I know he could not hurt me any more once we left Illinois, but there was always a small part of me that worried he might come looking for me someday. Now I know for certain that I am safe, that our children are safe. As for the rest, I do not feel much of anything. He stopped being a part of my life the night I ran. Whatever happened to him after that is not my concern." "That is healthy," Vincent said. "You have moved on, built a new life." "We built a new life," Rebecca corrected, "together. And I would not change a single thing about it, even the hard parts, because they led me here to you, to our children, to this home. I am happy, Vincent, truly, genuinely happy. I never thought I would be able to say that." Vincent pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I am happy too. Happier than I ever thought possible." The years continued to pass, bringing both challenges and joys. William grew into a bright, curious boy who loved helping his father with the horses and loved reading with his mother. The twins were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and getting into mischief together. When William was 7, Rebecca gave birth to another son, whom they named Thomas. 2 years later, their youngest daughter, Caroline, arrived, completing their family. Vincent's freighting business grew as well, becoming successful enough that he could hire help and stay closer to home more often. He and Rebecca saved their money carefully, eventually buying more land and building a larger house with enough room for their growing family. Rebecca's garden became legendary in the area, producing abundant vegetables and beautiful flowers that she sold at market. She also began writing, putting down on paper the story of her escape and survival and the love she had found. It was therapeutic, a way of processing everything she had been through, and eventually she began sharing her writing with other women who had experienced abuse. Through Rebecca's writing and speaking, she became known in the community as someone who helped women in difficult situations. More than once, a frightened woman showed up at their door and Rebecca would take her in, help her figure out her options, connect her with resources. Vincent supported this work wholeheartedly, proud of his wife's strength and compassion. As their children grew older, Vincent and Rebecca made sure to teach them about respect and equality. They raised their sons to understand that real men did not hit or belittle others. That strength came from character rather than physical power. They raised their daughters to know their own worth, to believe that they deserved to be treated with respect and kindness. The children grew up in a home filled with love and laughter, where disagreements were resolved with words rather than violence, where both parents shared in the work of running the household and raising the family. William was the first to leave home, heading to Chicago at 18 to study law. He wanted to help people, he said, to fight for justice the way his mother had fought for her own freedom. The twins followed a few years later, Sarah becoming a teacher and Elizabeth studying medicine. Thomas took over much of the freighting business, showing a natural aptitude for logistics and negotiation. Caroline, the baby of the family, showed talent in art and writing, taking after her mother. As they entered middle age, Vincent and Rebecca found themselves with an empty nest for the first time since early in their marriage. It was strange at first, the house so quiet without the sounds of children. But it was also nice to have time alone together, to remember what it was like to just be husband and wife rather than parents. They traveled some, taking the train to places they had always wanted to see. They visited William in Chicago, stayed with Sarah in her small apartment while she taught at the local school, met Elizabeth's colleagues at the hospital where she was training. They attended Thomas's wedding to a sweet young woman he had met in town, and they proudly displayed Caroline's paintings in their home. Throughout it all, the love between Vincent and Rebecca never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year. They had built a life together on a foundation of mutual respect, trust, and genuine affection. They still held hands when they walked together. Vincent still brought Rebecca wildflowers from the field. Rebecca still made Vincent's favorite meals and darned his socks. They still talked for hours about everything and nothing. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children arranged a surprise party. The house was filled with family and friends, all gathered to celebrate the couple who had overcome so much to build a life together. There were speeches and toasts, stories and laughter. William stood up and talked about how his parents had shown him what true love looked like. Sarah and Elizabeth tearfully thanked their mother for teaching them to be strong. Thomas praised his father's work ethic and integrity. Caroline read a poem she had written about love and resilience. But the most meaningful moment came when Vincent and Rebecca stood together to thank everyone for coming. Vincent pulled Rebecca close and looked into her eyes, those same deep brown eyes that had captivated him from the first moment he truly saw her. 25 years ago, Vincent said, his voice thick with emotion, I found a woman freezing to death under my wagon. I pulled her out and warmed her by the fire, thinking I was saving her life. But the truth is, she saved mine. Rebecca, you took a lonely cowboy who did not know what he was missing and showed him what it meant to truly live. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I thank God every day for that snowstorm that brought you into my life." Rebecca was crying openly now, not bothering to wipe away the tears. "And you showed me that I deserved to be loved, that I was worthy of kindness and respect. You gave me back my life when I thought it was over. You are my hero, Vincent Morgan, and I love you more today than I did on our wedding day." They kissed to thunderous applause from their gathered loved ones, and Vincent felt his heart so full he thought it might burst. This was what happiness looked like. This was what made all the struggles worthwhile. The years continued their relentless march forward. Vincent and Rebecca became grandparents, then great-grandparents. They watched their children's children grow and flourish, carrying forward the values of love and respect they had instilled. They grew old together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing down, but their love remaining constant. Vincent was 73 when he died peacefully in his sleep, Rebecca at his side as she had been for nearly 50 years. He went to bed one night after a good day spent with family and simply did not wake up. Rebecca held his hand and cried, mourning the loss of her partner, her best friend, the love of her life. But even in her grief, Rebecca was grateful. Grateful for the years they had together, for the life they had built, for the love they had shared. At Vincent's funeral, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, she stood and shared one final story. "I want to tell you about the night I met Vincent," she began, her voice still strong despite her age. "It was the worst night of my life and the best night of my life all at once. I was running from abuse, from a man who had hurt me for years. I was freezing to death in a snowstorm, had given up all hope. And then this cowboy found me under his wagon. He could have kept riding. He could have ignored me, but he did not. He pulled me out, warmed me by his fire, and asked for nothing in return. That was the kind of man Vincent Morgan was. He saw someone in need and he helped without question, without expecting anything back. That night, when I confessed to him what I was running from, he promised to keep me safe. And he kept that promise every single day for the rest of his life." Rebecca paused, looking around at all the faces of the family they had created together. "Vincent gave me a life I never dreamed possible. He showed me what real love looks like. And the greatest gift I can give him now is to make sure his legacy lives on through all of you. Love each other. Respect each other. Be kind. Be strong. Be the kind of people who stop to help when they see someone in need. That is what Vincent would want." Rebecca lived for 5 more years after Vincent's death, staying active and involved with her family until the very end. She continued to write, to speak to women's groups, to tend her beloved garden. And every night before bed, she would look at the photograph of Vincent on her bedside table and whisper, "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me. I will see you soon." When Rebecca finally passed away at the age of 76, surrounded by family, her last words were about Vincent. "I see him," she said, her face lighting up with joy. "He is waiting for me." The funeral was held on a beautiful spring day, much like the day they had married all those years ago. As the family gathered at the cemetery to lay Rebecca to rest beside Vincent, wildflowers bloomed everywhere, as if nature itself was celebrating the reunion of 2 souls who had always belonged together. William, now an elderly man himself, stood at the graveside and spoke for all the children. "Our parents showed us what it means to truly love someone. They overcame incredible obstacles to be together, and they built a life based on mutual respect, trust, and genuine affection. Their love story began on the worst night of our mother's life, when she was freezing and afraid under a wagon. But that night led to decades of happiness, to a family that spans generations, to a legacy of love and kindness that will continue long after we are all gone. We are all here because a cowboy named Vincent Morgan chose to look under his wagon on a snowy night. We are all here because a woman named Rebecca Cooper was brave enough to run toward an uncertain future. And we are all here because they chose each other, day after day, year after year, building something beautiful from the ashes of pain and fear. As the family dispersed after the service, walking among the wildflowers and sharing memories, there was sadness but also celebration. Vincent and Rebecca's story was one of redemption and healing, of love conquering fear, of two broken people making each other whole. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth passing down through the generations. Years later, when great-great-grandchildren asked about the couple in the old photographs, they were told the story of how it all began. A winter night in 1878. A cowboy making camp in a snowstorm. A woman freezing under his wagon. A confession that left him breathless. And a love that lasted beyond death itself. It was a story of the Wild West, of hardship and survival, of the kind of courage it takes to run toward freedom and the kind of kindness it takes to offer shelter to a stranger. But most of all, it was a love story, pure and simple, the kind that reminds us that even in our darkest moments, hope can be found. Sometimes it comes in the form of a warm fire on a frozen night. Sometimes it comes in the form of a strong, gentle man who sees your worth when you have forgotten it yourself. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, it comes in the form of a love that transforms your entire life, that makes every struggle worth it, that creates a legacy that outlasts mortality. Vincent and Rebecca Morgan's story became part of family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. The cabin where they started their life together was preserved, maintained by descendants who wanted to remember where it all began. The garden Rebecca had planted and tended for so many years continued to bloom, carefully maintained as a living memorial. And in the small cemetery in Galena, Illinois, two headstones stood side by side with a simple inscription that told their whole story in just a few words. Here lie Vincent and Rebecca Morgan. He saved her life. She saved his soul, together forever. For in the end, that was the truth at the heart of everything. On that frozen night in January of 1878, when Vincent Morgan found a desperate woman sheltering under his wagon, when she confessed her terrible circumstances and her fear and her hope all in one breathless moment, neither of them knew they were beginning a love story for the ages. They could not have known that this chance meeting would lead to decades of happiness, to a family that would span generations, to a love that would be remembered and celebrated long after they were gone. But that is the nature of love, perhaps. It arrives unexpectedly, often in our darkest hours, and it transforms everything. It gives us reasons to be brave, reasons to hope, reasons to believe that tomorrow can be better than today. Vincent gave Rebecca safety and respect and tenderness when she had known only fear and pain. Rebecca gave Vincent purpose and joy and a family when he had been drifting through life alone. Together, they created something neither could have built separately. Their descendants continued to tell the story, each generation adding their own memories and perspectives. They spoke of Vincent's kindness and strength, Rebecca's resilience and compassion. They talked about the values the couple had instilled, about the importance of treating others with respect, about standing up for what is right, about helping those in need. The Morgan family became known in their community for these qualities, a direct legacy of the foundation Vincent and Rebecca had laid. And so the story ended not with death but with life, with love continuing across generations, with the proof that one act of kindness on a frozen night could ripple forward through time, creating waves of goodness that touched hundreds of lives. Vincent found a freezing woman under his wagon and chose compassion over convenience. Rebecca confessed her circumstances and chose to trust despite her fear. Together, they chose each other, day after day, building a love story that would be remembered for generations to come. In the end, that was their triumph, their legacy, their gift to the world. They showed that love could heal, that kindness mattered, that it was possible to overcome even the darkest past and build a bright future. They showed that real love was not about grand gestures or dramatic moments, but about the quiet, steady choice to cherish and respect each other through all the ordinary days of life. They showed that, from the worst circumstances could come the best outcomes, if you had courage and kindness and someone willing to take a chance on you. And somewhere, in whatever lies beyond this life, Vincent and Rebecca Morgan were together still, their love transcending even death itself, a testament to the power of compassion and the enduring nature of true love.